Happy holidays! I'm Holly, I'm a writer, and in the run-up to Christmas I thought I would do a bunch of videos talking about a few things. It is coming up to the sort of time that I came up with the idea for Formation Lab, so my next video is actually going to be talking about how I got into Formula One when, you know, the way that all happened. But this one is a gift giving or like things that you can ask for Christmas. Obviously it is late November, but there are a lot of people who don't ask for things until really late, or they don't buy things really late. So if you are looking for like a last minute book and you're like, oh, I need to get something for somebody, what do I do? I got a little, it's not the most diverse selection ever because I had to pick it off my shelves, and I tried to pick things that weren't necessarily the most obvious. There are quite a few that are more obvious, and there are also some books that I didn't personally enjoy that I didn't want to recommend but that I think could be recommended. So like I went for stuff that I enjoyed that I thought would be you know, something that you might want to get for a gift for somebody. To immediately dispel my previous statement, the first book is Animal Farm by George Orwell. This one, I'm recommending it because I think a lot of people, when they buy Orwell for somebody, they buy 1984 or they ask for 1984. I personally didn't love 1984. I thought it was good, like it's as a book, obviously, especially for the time. Its implications and whatnot are very important, but I preferred this one. This is significantly shorter. This is like you finish it in like an hour. It's 100 and something pages, and it's based off of like the Russian Revolution, and so it's told through farm animals. There's, if you have a child in your life, a young child, there's a book called Farmer Duck, which is this but for children. And it's basically, there are a bunch of farm animals and they get really annoyed and they decide to overthrow the farmer and start just running the farm themselves, basically. And it's the Russian Revolution but told. And so it's like a criticism of, you know, it's brilliant. It's really quick and easy to read. It's super fun. And it has a lot of the stuff that 1984 discusses about, like the idea that the people who control like the media, the people who can say about what happened in the past being different than what actually happened and be believed because they have like authority, you know, they're the ones who control the masses. It's very interesting, especially when you consider sort of like Stalinist stuff and how he was a very big revisionist. He did obviously a lot of like the doctoring of photos to remove people who he vanished. He removed Trotsky from a lot of the picture. Trotsky was like Lenin's right-hand guy. He was objectively, if it wasn't for Lenin, like the only other person who would have made sure that that revolution happened was Trotsky, and he removed him from the picture. He made him seem like a huge traitor, and he made himself seem like he had a bigger part in it, despite the fact that he really didn't. This is a really interesting book for that reason. And if you don't like know Russian history, it's quite important, I think, globally speaking, because of things like the Cold War, and the way that Russia is portrayed nowadays. There is a reason for all of that, and this is interesting. Again, I don't want to talk too much about it because it's based off of real historical events. Like the things that happen have a precedent, right? But it's about farm animals who overthrow a farmer, and it's got some really interesting discussions of the very classic Orwellian ideas, and it's just super easy and quick, and it is a modern classic again, so the writing style is very easy to engage with regardless of your experience with classics. And so it's a really good gift for somebody who's trying to get into reading, but also for somebody who just maybe hasn't read it despite the fact that they've done a lot of reading, whether that's you or somebody else. So book one. Book two is also a classic. It's not the last classic, but it is the oldest, but it's not intimidating. Again, I've tried to pick books that are very easy to read for everybody. The Three Musketeers. I must have spoken about this. I refuse to think that I haven't. this is one of my favourite books. It has been for quite a long time. I read it when I was a kid. The Barbie and the Three Musketeers film is my favourite Barbie film. Well, no, it's not my favourite, but it's my Roman Empire. It was the film that like kick-started me. I think I must have been like 8 or something when I remember very distinctly the first time that I watched that film. I was obsessed. And this book, it's not the same. Don't go into it thinking it's the same. But it's about 3 musketeers and this new musketeer that they meet who comes from like a smaller town. His father has like a recommendation letter so that he can go and become a musketeer, and he meets these 3 musketeers in very stupidly funny way, and they all like, hey, you just like, we just had a bit of a thing here, so we should deal with that in the way that we deal with things, which is to have a duel. So he arranges to have a duel with all 3 of them, and they go to like the first duel and they're like, hey, that's the same guy. And he's like, you made 3 appointments to fight to the death. And then they get interrupted by some men of the Cardinals. It's kind of difficult to explain, but it's set in France. And it's based off of like real history, but it plays with it. It's kind of like fan fiction, but in the way that a lot of classics were fan fiction. And so it follows them dealing with the queen, the king's, wife, who has this secret lover, and there's like a war that's being started between France and England, and there's the cardinal and the king, and the cardinal has a lot of power, and so the musketeers, who are the king's men, they don't get along with the cardinal's men, and so the cardinal's men, they get into a fight with these 3 musketeers, and this new guy, he helps them out, and then they become very fast friends, and they go on this big adventure, and it's just really like, it's funny. I think people, they talk about classics like this and they don't really talk about how funny it is. Like, it's not a super serious book. You look at the adaptations that have been done of this, I feel like they look really serious, and you look at them and it's like really gritty, like, oh, we gotta build up the drama. This book is just crazy. My favorite character, I have one specific musketeer. I'm not gonna say who. There are actually 3 of these. I've read the first 2. The third one I haven't read yet because it doesn't come in a matching cover, so I'm a little bit salty about that. But I was like highlighting things in this. I'm trying to find a highlighted bit, because some of the things are just, again, they're funny. I don't know why I've highlighted that. I mean, I guess I do. It's because that's where they live. Oh. This is a line that I like. Well, it's a little bit. So it says, his utterances were brief and expressive, always saying what they meant to say and nothing more. His conversation was a fact without accessories. I just think it's really fun. Like, it's not a badly written book. Like, I think sometimes when you think of like a funny book, you think it's sort of cheapened almost. But it just is not. Yeah, so one of them literally acknowledges how funny it is because one of the affronts that he makes to these musketeers is that he gets caught up in his like cape. It's so dumb, but it's like, it's so enjoyable. This is like, it's an adventure story that's just so fun, and I will recommend it because yes, it's quite long. Okay, I think it's like 700 pages, give or take, but it's 700 pages of fun, and you want to keep reading, you want to keep knowing what's happening next. It's not super boring. The conversations, as I said, they're quite funny. There are a lot of different characters who you can come to really like, and there is like, it's really interesting, like the story itself, the plot, it's great. It's political intrigue, it's, there's like a war and these characters are like involved in it, but it's also just like, it's a romp, I really like this. I think that it's kind of brilliant. Just, again, like, if you're not a big fan of classics, it's not too difficult to read. It would help if you knew the basic stuff of, like, for example, you know how we have, like, in English, it would be Mr., Miss, Mrs., Ms. In French, this version uses like the French abbreviations, so you need to understand like Monsieur, Madame, and like but it's not too difficult. Like you figure it out very quickly, right? Like I would imagine most people know those words anyway, so it's not that. And the politics, you would be better if you knew the real politics, but it's also fictionalized, so you know, it's fine. Again, I don't want to talk too much about it because there's just so much that happens in this, like so much, and it's it's all connected, but it's kind of crazy. Basically, the main guy, he has this like a seamstress of the Queen's who he falls in love with, and she goes missing. Or like his landlady's, she's like the seamstress of the Queen, but she's also his landlady's wife, and she goes missing, and it's very suspicious, and it's like part of this conspiracy, and that's how he gets swept up in it. It's just really interesting. Like there's some stuff that obviously it's very old, it's very dodgy a bit. I don't know if that's just this translation, but it's really good. Like I recommend it so much. And again, I think a lot of people are probably intimidated when they see it because they think it's going to be this really serious story, but it's a fun story, and it's got really enjoyable dynamics that a lot of people try to emulate today in their work. So I'm just going to take a water break because I'm thirsty. I've just realised yeah, it's right there because I have to keep them. I can never get rid of them. I did actually get rid of a few. I got rid of the sequel to Mariposa, who is up there. Okay. The next one is not, the rest of them are all modern to contemporary, but Remarkably Bright Creatures. I mentioned that smells really good. That smells like my copy of The Hobbit used to. Anyway, this is, I mentioned it in, I made a video about like my favourite books that I read this year. I didn't own a copy of it then. I asked for a copy for my birthday. I got a copy. I also got a copy of Lessons in Chemistry and Bright Young Women. I actually got 2 copies of that, which are both on my shelf because my sister got me one and my dad got me one, so I don't want to get rid of either of the copies because they were gifts from my dad and my sister. And one's a hardback, one's a paperback, so it's fine. They're in different places. But this is a book, Remarkably Bright Creatures. I read this from my library because my main character, Information Lab, Natasha, she loves octopuses. So I thought I would buy a book about octopuses. I didn't fully realise that it was fiction when I got it, I'll be honest. But it was available for free, so I was like, I'll just read it. And it took me a little bit to start caring about it, but basically it's about 3 people, and I say people, one of them's an octopus. And so you have this octopus who, basically there's this octopus who's in captivity, right? And it starts off by sort of saying, this is how long this type of octopus lives, this is how old I am, and I've spent all of it in captivity. And it's about this octopus who is close to aging out of his life. And he works at this museum where this woman is a cleaner. And this woman is very old. She's lost, you know, her family. Her son died in a sort of accident. And so she's all alone, basically. And she works this job. She's very old. And then there's this guy who, he thinks that his father is this rich guy. He's very poor. He's just been like broken up with. And so he's like, I'm going to travel to this place. I think it's by like the place, the rainy place. The place in San Francisco or something. There's like a place up in like California, like a place where there's like sort of like oceans and I don't know what I'm trying to say. I don't know where, but I'm thinking of this place. Anyway, it's set in America, and this guy goes to try and find his, you know, his dad, who he thinks is his dad. And while he's there, he decides to get a job working at the aquarium as a cleaner to help this woman because she had like an injury, right? And she's friends with this octopus. She knows that this octopus escapes his cage. She saves his life one day. And basically it's about this octopus and about these people and about how, you know, our connections to people are very important and how sometimes things come when we need them to. And so the octopus narrates some of the chapters. Like if I start at the very first bit, it says day 1299 of my captivity, and it talks about who he is, and you know, then there's like the woman's chapters and then there's the man's chapters. It's a story that's very heartwarming. I can't really talk about this one without spoiling it because it's not super plot heavy. Like it's got a lot of plot, but it is mostly about the characters and specifically the thing that sort of happens. I saw it coming, so I don't necessarily think it's the biggest spoiler in the world, but I'm not going to say it anyway. But it's basically about this older woman learning to move on, you know, because her husband's no longer around, the home that she has and stuff, like she's getting old, she's getting vulnerable. Her work, like she's been doing work every day for like her entire life. She's lost her son and she's kind of just alone and she needs to be able to move on. And this octopus is learning to accept, you know, the fact that he's going to be dead soon and that he might never see the ocean. And she wants him to see the ocean, she wants that, but it's obviously a very complicated situation. And so you also then have this guy who's young, but he's kind of not done anything with his life really, and he's starting to figure out by being in this town and by knowing the people here that maybe he could actually make something good of his life, and that maybe he doesn't need to meet this person who he thinks is his dad, and that maybe that isn't like, you know, he shouldn't just be mooching off of a wealthy father, for example, and he should be working hard and doing something that he can be proud of. And it's a really sweet story. I loved reading it. It was just so good, and like the cover's so cute. I love a yellow book, I really do. But it's about the octopus, it's about the woman, and it's about the man, and it just is so creative as a story. I think it's like one of those that really sticks with you because there's not very many things like it. It's not often you get a book written from the perspective of an octopus. So I think he's a giant reef octopus or something. A giant Pacific octopus, sorry. I think I'm thinking of a Caribbean reef octopus. I've never said Caribbean as Caribbean before. Sorry, that's just weird. Anyway, yeah. This is a really sweet one. This is, I think this is good, especially for like older people. If you have an older reader in your life who maybe hasn't read this, this is good. Like this is such a book club for middle-aged women type of book, but anyone could read this. Like this is, you know what I mean? So it's a very accessible book that is good for a diverse audience. Whereas, for example, the other two maybe, for example, if you had somebody who only read romance, you probably wouldn't want to buy them the other two books, whereas they might like this book anyway. Speaking of romance, this is one of the only romance books that I have enjoyed. I'm not a huge romance reader. I've read a fair few because I do try and give things a chance, but I picked this up because of the cover. This is The Giver of Stars by Jojo Moyes. Smells a bit like my cleaning fluid, but basically this is a book which the romance is kind of secondary, which I think is why I like it. But it's, first of all, Jojo Moyes, who wrote Me Before You, you know, so you can trust that it's a decent book in terms of the writing and stuff. The other cover, the paperback, super cute. Okay, it's got like a bunch of books, because basically this book is about a group of women who in, I think like Alabama or something, one of them is a British woman, the main character, whose like narrative it is, she's a British woman who grew up in sort of like aristocracy, and her family don't really trust her to have her own life and make her own choices. So she meets this American guy and she kind of is enamored with him, and they get married very quickly, and then he takes her back to this place, but he's never really around and he doesn't seem that interested in it and he doesn't want to touch her. And she gets a little bit stressed out, so she decides to join this program where it's like a walking library, and these women volunteer to literally walk, take donkeys and stuff up into the mountains to the rural areas of this town to help give the people living there the ability to be literate. You know, they have children's books, they have adult books, they have cookbooks, they have, you know, stuff. This is a very woman's movement book. One of the main plot points is, you know, first of all, it's about the woman whose marriage is kind of a mess and how she got into that marriage to escape a lack of freedom. It's about her making choices for herself for the first time. But it's also about, in general, like this town is scandalized by this book that is aimed at women talking about sex, and how that was kind of like unheard of because this is in the perhaps the late 18th, maybe the 19th century. It's like before women had lots of rights, which we still don't, let's be honest, but it was before the major sort of stuff was going on. And it's just a really good story about books and the importance of them, and especially in the way that they impact women and they empower women. I think that in the modern day especially, like I read this 5 years ago, like nearly 6 years ago, and I think that when you consider that we are now in a time period where women are talking freely online about the romance, the sexually explicit romances that they read, it's really interesting to compare the attitudes. Because look, I have a lot of criticisms of the books themselves, but also the industry and the way that it uses them, the way that women's sort of rights are impacted sometimes by the things in these books. However, I think that on the broader sort of scale, these books are very important and they always have been. And this book does a really good job of sort of showing how people will really go on like a witch hunt for women who are confident in their sexuality, for women who, you know, they're literally doing it like with their husbands and they're making their husbands feel better, and it like is still something that they get criticized for, and it's something that they try and use it as an excuse to prevent the books from being done at all, like to shut the program down. It's just very interesting in the light of like the book bans that have been happening recently. I do think that it is important, and it deals again with those sorts of themes of like womanhood and, you know, women sticking together, and the idea of choice and of choosing to, you know, be proactive about what you do with your life and to make decisions, even if they're hard sometimes, to stand by what you believe is right. And I just think that's so good. And I would recommend it. I think it's, in my opinion, a good like romance. Like it definitely has that element, but it also is just a sort of more literary story about, it's based off of a real group of people, and I've talked about this before definitely, but I would recommend it for like a Christmas gift, especially because I think that it takes place during the winter partially, I think. I'm pretty sure. And I feel like it's got a good sort of wholesome and yet also serious enough that you're like, I need to keep turning page vibe. So yeah, I would recommend that one. The next is another book that I've definitely recommended before. This is The Hustler. This author wrote The Queen's Gambit. Also wrote a science fiction book, which is really famous, but I can't think of the name. which is stupid, but this is a 2-book series. One book happens now, another happens like 30 or something years later. But this is the first. This is super accessible. This is a modern book. It was turned into a film very soon after it was like written. I think like the 50s, 60s sort of time. This book is about a pool hustler who, it's literally just about pool. The plot is that this guy wants to be the best, and he decides that to be the best, he has to beat the best. So he goes to this one very famous pool hall to try and beat the best. And it's about him playing pool. It's about the love of pool. It's about the lifestyle of being a hustler versus being somebody who's like dedicated to, you know, the craft sort of thing. And it just is really good. It's the second one I would also recommend, but obviously you should read the first one before you decide to read the second. The second one has a bit more of his private life and a bit more of the like consequences of being a sports person and it like not really paying that well, and him gaining another passion and it being sort of ruined, vandalized, and that's a pretty big spoiler, but it's fine because it's mostly about pool. But it's about pool, and it doesn't sound like it would be that interesting, but I promise you it's so good. I think this is better than The Queen's Gambit. The Queen's Gambit, if you've seen the show, you've basically read the book. It's a brilliant adaptation. It's so like it's difficult to talk about this one because again, nothing kind of happens. It's just about pool. One of them's about an octopus and the way that it impacts the lives of the people. One of them is about a bunch of musketeers doing stuff. One is about animals on a farm. This is about pool player. But it is, honestly, I'm underselling it, if anything. It's really good. The writing style, if I read like the first line, Henry, black and stooped, unlocked the door with a key on a large metal ring. He had just come up in the elevator. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. The door was a massive thing, a great ornate slab of oak, stained once to look like mahogany, ebony now from 6 years of smoke and dirt. He pushed the door open, shoved the doorstop in place with his lame foot, and limped in. It's really easy to read. It's accessible, and again, it's an old book. The language isn't always going to be perfect. I don't know if there are any trigger warnings specifically in this book. The next one definitely does have a few. Quite a few. But it's just really accessible, and I think that, again, this is like a sort of classic, a modern classic. If you wanted to read a book that was like, you know, sort of big and special but not difficult and tedious. I thought I had a cat licking themselves. I don't know where that came from, but this is just, it's brilliant, and I love the cover. The covers of these books are so good. The sequel is called The Colour of Money because of the colour of felt on a pool table. It's brilliant. Yeah, I'm really bad at this, I'm sorry. The next one I can talk a lot more about. This is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I'm going to start this, okay? I'm not going to talk too much about the trigger warnings. Look up the trigger warnings. Look them up. There are so many. There is very casual racism. There is very explicit mentions of depression and specifically like suicidal ideation. There is an attempt. That's not a spoiler. That is like the whole point, is that this main character is depressed. It's based off of the real life Sylvia Plath and her time being very depressed. And the reason why I put it on here, despite the fact that it has got a lot of problematic things, is A, because the author is dead. You are not supporting her when you buy this book. It's not like buying a whole, you know, collection of like the Harry Potter books and that money going directly into anti-trans fundraising stuff as a result of J.K. Rowling being a TERF. This is literally just, you know, you are buying the book, and it's a really interesting book for what it is, because while there is like the bad stuff that makes you go, it's also just got a really real portrayal of depression. And look, okay, I read this when I was 17, I think. I read this, I bought it in an airport because the books were like 2 books, you get one of them half price. The other book that I bought was yellow. It, funnily enough, I would say is like the modern day equivalent of the bell jar, which could be in this list, but whatever. This one, I didn't think I was gonna like it, and then I read it and I was like, this is life-changing. There are bits of this book that made me feel, for the first time in my life, like somebody understood my depression. It was like someone held a mirror to my depression, and I was like, yes, there's a lot of stuff in here that's not great. Please do check the warnings. Don't go into this lightly. For the love of God, don't do it. But it is written by a woman who lived through being treated for depression in a time when mental health, especially for women, was just not a thing. It talks about electroshock therapy. It talks about things like, not in depth, right? It doesn't like openly talk about these things in like a retrospective way. It just says like, this is about a 19-year-old girl. She's in New York. She's doing this like fashion internship thing for a magazine, and she wants to be a writer, and she's applied for this prestigious course, and she's so excited and she has so much hope. And then every like time that something feels like it's going well, she gets asked a question about like, what skills does she have? And she doesn't really have any other than writing. She doesn't really have like the ability to be a secretary. She doesn't have like shorthand. She doesn't have like a language that she has learned, you know, that she's fluent in. She doesn't have like these like things that a lot of other people have. She needs the money from other people. And she basically gets really depressed, and there's a quote where it's like, I was supposed to be having the time of my life, and yet she wasn't. That is, oh my God. Where? I don't know, whatever. I don't know where it is, but it's about that, and it jumps between the past and the present. So in the past, she's had this relationship with a man, and she realizes how hypocritical it all is, that men are allowed to have sex whenever they want and women aren't allowed to say anything about it. But if a woman does, she gets a lot of criticism for it, and she's like less valuable all of a sudden, and it really irritates her. And she's like, it's like she really realizes how unfair it is, and she's like, well, I'm gonna do something about that. And it has discussions of like female health, female mental health, the way that mental health has always been sort of stigmatized, and treatment was never necessarily something that was done right. It was something that was done very carelessly. You know, malpractice, it's like in this book, and it's about how it sort of begins and how she starts to just very casually think about ending her life. And I honestly like recommend this to anybody who doesn't think they're going to be majorly triggered, because it is, as I said, it's very graphic. There's stuff to do with she has a bad sexual experience, not in like it was consensual, but it's actually kind of iconic. She calls the guy afterwards and is like, you're paying for the hospital bill, by the way, you're paying the bill. But it goes into a lot of like the old dynamics with women in a way that is really interesting to read now. And it's, you know, again, it's written from somebody who had these experiences, and it's just kind of like, it's a funny book. It's not supposed to be taken super seriously, but it also can be read very seriously. This is a really good book to read if you want to read about, as I said, women, but also if you want to look at the way in which, you know, the system has been very biased towards men for a very long time. And it goes into that. It goes into a lot of things, including, you know, how like sometimes we do things and we have good intentions and it doesn't go well, and then we feel very hurt by that, and like our reactions to it and other people's reactions to it. There's a lot in this that I think is very real and very human, and it makes sense because it is based off of her experiences as a woman in that time who was depressed. And yeah, I don't know, it feels really weird sometimes to talk about it because I really love this. This is, I think, joint first for my favourite book. And it feels weird saying that because there are problems with it, and I acknowledge that. And I think, like, if you're somebody who's not going to be able to read this because you are a person of colour, I'm not going to make you read something that's racist and so casually racist and, like, it doesn't acknowledge it. Because that, you know, you go through that every day. But as somebody who was depressed and who read this as a teenager after years of being really just done with life, this book gives me hope. After my cat died, I read this before I went back to school for the first time after that happened, because I was like, I need to feel right, and this book makes me feel right. It's really messed up. Don't know what that says about me, kind of do, but it just is such a good book, and it's historically good, you know? So I recommend this. And again, check the warnings very, like, look them up because there are so many. But it is really good, and especially as something that you can dive into and really pick apart, it is so interesting. And I just think the portrayal of everything is so accurate and realistic that it really resonated with me. I actually have like 5-6 copies of it. I have 5 copies currently, all different. One of them I actually got as a gift for somebody and then I didn't give it, so that's the copy I let people borrow. I got this copy from my mother. It came in like a gift set. I have an illustrated copy, and then I have a different illustrated copy which is illustrated by a different person, so it's fine. And I have read 3 of the copies. I haven't read the illustrated ones yet because they are more new books and I haven't been in the right place to read them since, which sounds stupid because I read it when I'm like mentally very bad, but I've been physically bad. I'm still, actually, just a little update on that because it's like the Christmas holiday, you know, video, and this is good news. I have an appointment to actually try and get diagnosed with whatever's wrong with me. I've been given medication to try and see if that's what's wrong with me and if it can be easily solved. Things are going well for me, in theory. Obviously, I could get diagnosed with something and then it's like a months-long process, but things are moving forward and I'm very hopeful about the future, and I cannot wait to be well and to be like living my life and to be actually taking you places that are beyond this room. Because trust me, I'm gonna do some writing like vlogs where I go to like cafes and stuff. I'd love to do a video going to my local, not my local library, it's not like the nearest library to me, but the main library. I'm from Liverpool. I love that library. It's absolutely gorgeous. I would love to do a video where I just take you around there. I'd love to go around the museums and sort of talk about inspirations and stuff. Anyway, I'm just excited. It's a holiday mood, so I'm, you know, being a little bit less strict with myself. Not that I ever was, but yeah. This is kind of the opposite way. If The Bell Jar is racist and that's why you don't want to read it, you may not want to read this because it is about racism. It's called Killers of the Flower Moon, and it is about the Osage? Yes, the Osage natives who... This is based off a real story. It's not based off a real story. It is the real story. This is nonfiction. This is the only piece of nonfiction in here. I was trying to think of ones to include, but I have a whole video about nonfiction, so you can just go read that. This is a book that I finally got a physical copy of. I had only until a bit ago, again, I asked for this because I didn't own 2 of the books by this author and I wanted them. I had read this one as an audiobook. It was really good. This is about people who were killed, specifically Native Americans who were killed as a result of like oil territory and like oil disputes and stuff like that. And there was again, like a conspiracy, but like a real conspiracy that actually happened and got the FBI involved, and it changed the way that the FBI worked. Yeah, Oil, Money, Murder and the Birth of the FBI. It is so interesting, and I don't want to say too much about it because, first of all, it's been a while since I listened to it, so I don't know all of the details, but I thought that it handled the Native American stuff pretty well. I can't talk, I'm not Native. I think realistically, I have like zero Native American blood at all. I think I'm probably the most white English Irish person that's ever like existed. So I can't say anything about that from like an actual perspective. But it didn't, for example, it didn't use the I word to describe them. And it talked about their story in a lot of detail about their personal lives, the way that they were actually affected by this, rather than it just being like, oh, they were killed. And the reason why I think this is so good, especially for people who, if they want to start reading more nonfiction, this is a really good one. It's got a very narrative nonfiction style. It feels like you're reading fiction at times, but it's also, you know, it's educational. But this is also really good for people because it's a topic that's not really talked about. I want to learn more about Native Americans and like the American Civil War. We don't learn about that in England, and I do think it's really interesting, specifically because I have an interest in Native Americans. As part of my American Lit course at university that I did, we had to learn about like the storytelling of Native Americans, like their creation myths and whatnot, and it just was so interesting to me. And I have like a few people that I've seen that I follow who are Native. There is a lot of the Native population who goes missing or gets killed in America today, and no one really talks about it. And I just think it's really like, I watched Anne with an E when I was like years ago, and that was the first time that I'd ever heard about the residential schools, which were basically, they were prisons where they forced natives to conform to white Christian standards and stuff, and they would kill them. And I feel like that sort of stuff still isn't really talked about. When it comes to Black issues, obviously you tend to discuss the slave trade, at least we did in school, like a lot. You tend to sometimes learn about things like the non-white troops who fought because they were part of the Commonwealth. You know, you might learn a little bit about like India and the relationships with Britain, but you don't tend to. These are people whose stories have had such a huge impact on ours, and we don't learn about them. And I'm aware that I'm saying that again as a white person. I just find it really interesting, and I think that it's also one of those things that's really important. And so reading this book was a really good start. I actually have a few books that I'd like to read that are specifically about natives. This is also about like the FBI and how they went about the investigation. It's about what actually was like going on. But it's really, you know, it's about corruption. It's about corruption and the way that that affects especially the marginalized communities. And I'm writing my dissertation, not right now, but I'm like planning it very heavily. I'm thinking about it a lot. That sort of topic is something that I've been thinking about a lot. Because especially in like Donna Tartt, there's a lot of very casual racism that the characters do. Things where, you know, non-white characters take the blame for things that don't happen. And I'm not implying anything about Donna Tartt, by the way, but I do think that there is this sort of expectation that those things are going to be overlooked because they're not important. They are. And this has just gotten very serious. Basically, this is about a bunch of people who've been killed, why they've been killed, how the situation was resolved. I just really recommend it. I think it's a really good book, and yeah, it doesn't shy away from being like, look, this was racism. This was like targeted racism based off of a person's ethnic background and like their, like, you know, their culture and stuff. And it's really important, and I just think that everyone should at least be aware of the stuff that sort of happens in like in the modern day world. But this is a really good book. I also do recommend the other books by the same author. I've only read The Wager so far, but I have one of the others, and so far The Wager it was good. Not as good as this one, weirdly, even though I wanted to read that one first. This is really good. The only thing is that there is a person in the film who I really don't like, always giving me like the ick, and he seems to haunt films that I want to watch. It's just really irritating. But yeah, there's a whole book, and it's very interesting, and I do think that it's one of those that's kind of worth watching, at the very least, because if you aren't a big non-fiction fan, I can understand why you wouldn't want to read the book. But the audiobook especially had like 3 narrators. 2 of them I liked, 1 of them I didn't, but it's fine. It was really interesting, it was really engaging. I recommend it. The final book, I don't even know how long I've been doing this. The final book is Assassin's Apprentice. This is the first book in the what is it called? The something things, the something, the what? There's like a name for it. I'm sorry, I don't know. Assassin's Apprentice. This is a fantasy. Epic fantasy, high fantasy. It's about a young boy who is he's the literal bastard. Like, he was born out of marriage, and he is the son of a prince who is supposed to be becoming the king next. Like, when his father dies, he was supposed to be the king. He abdicates because he finds out that his son exists, and so he chooses to, you know, leave. And the son is raised in the court as like a member of the family, but not a member of the family. And so he gets taken in by this guy who the king is like, look, I will take care of you if you take care of me. And that means that you're going to work with this guy. And he's like, well, who is this guy? And he's like, he's a guy. And then the guy is an assassin. And he's like, I'm going to train you to be an assassin. And it's hard work, and you may not like it, but you're gonna get good at it anyway. And so they do, and it's book 1 in a trilogy. There's then other books in the same world. Brilliantly written, brilliant fantasy. I don't want to say too much about the stuff, but basically it's set in this world where the royals are given a name that is supposed to represent their character. So for example, there's Verity, there's Chivalry, who is this guy's father. He's called Fitz because he's a bastard. But he gets called Fitz Chivalry because he's the bastard of chivalry. There's Regal, who is one of his uncles, who is like really awful. The king is called Trude. He had a wife called Patience, and I think that's his old wife. Is there a family tree? I don't think there is, which is a shame. But basically this story, it's really interesting. It's one of those where the world building is very good. It's this, like, there's this thing called the skill, right? And the skill is where you can like project images, you can read people's minds, you can project things into their minds, and that means that you can also influence them. And royal families, people with royal lineage, have this skill. It's like a thing. And so this kid, it's assumed that he might have the skill, but he also has this thing which I can't remember the name of, where it's like he's not supposed to talk about it. this person finds out that he has it, Burrick, who is like his guardian. He's the stable master who takes care of him. He raises him, and he like can control, he can talk to animals and be one with them. And it's supposed to be like a stain. It's supposed to be like you are like the devil sort of thing. And so he's like, you can't use that. You can never let anyone know that you will use that or they will kill you. This book, it's about all of this sort of kingdom and how there are these creatures who, they're real people from these people who get kidnapped for ransom. And the ransom is that either you pay us money or we return them. And they're like, hey, that's weird. But when they get returned, they've been forged and they're violent. They go off of instinct. They're selfish. They will kill people to take what they have, even if it's something that like is completely unnecessary. And these people, they don't know how to fix it. They don't know what to do. The only way that they've figured out is to kill them so that you don't have to watch your loved ones kill you or kill like a baby or something. And so they're trying to stop these raiders from the other place who are doing this because they're just destroying, seemingly for the sake of destroying. And there's like a lot of politics between the different parts. It's called the Six Duchies, and it's like basically different kingdoms. They're all united under this big one and this king, right? And so it's just this really interesting, like very political fantasy about so many different things. It's got like the family, it's got, you know, the way of like doing what's right and how sometimes that means that your life ends up being kind of miserable. It's got, you know, all of this stuff where like you have so many questions about what's going on and you don't get them. And it progresses through this trilogy. It's so like, the author Robin Hobb, I like, there are no words for how brilliant. My favourite of the books so far is still Ship of Magic, which is after this trilogy. There's another trilogy which is called The Live Ship Traders, which is about a group of ships in, can I see the map? I don't think it's on here, which makes sense. But there's a place in this same world, as I said, which is... Oh no, it is. So, hang on, let me find... This is where the character in this book lives, where he's from. And this is where the character in the other book is from. So it's in the same world. And that book is, again, there's a lot of political stuff, but it's also about this woman who, you know, the ship that she has grown up sailing on is given over to her brother-in-law. And he turns it into a slave ship. And the ship, the reason why this is important, the ship is alive. The ship has feelings. The ship knows this family and knows this woman, and she is like heartbroken to be away from her ship. And so she goes on like a sort of quest to try and recover her ship and stuff. She meets on the journey her father's old first mate, who like they have like a whole thing. It's about her sister, who's, the character development of her sister is brilliant. I hated that woman to begin with, and now I'm like, you know what, you go. But it's really interesting, okay? This world is just so rich and it feels so real and it's so like fun. Like the magic is brilliant, but it is just so intriguing and political, and the family dynamics and stuff are great, and it's so vast. And I would really recommend it, especially if you are like a romantasy reader who perhaps has wanted to try more like non-romantic fantasy. This is a really good one, I would say, to read, because it's, first of all, it's short. It's like 400 pages. Close enough. But it's not too long. It's a really good one, and there's a lot in this world, so if you like it, you're not going to get lost. But also for a first book, it's not too long. I think a lot of fantasy books, the first book is just as long as the rest. this one isn't. I'm just going to add Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine is the book that was quite like The Bell Jar but modern. That is less problematic. Similar trigger warnings. Kind of different story, but like it has like a similar sort of vibe. So if you don't want to read The Bell Jar but you want something similar about mental health, women, Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. Again, check the trigger warnings. And as I said, Ship of Magic, you can also read that first. That's the one I read first. But I would recommend going all the way through because there's a lot of books. So yes, that is it. I hope that this was helpful. I'm sorry it's so late. I did intend to do this like a week ago. But it's fine. It's fine. And I think what I'll do is the next video, as I said, will be about Formula One and about how I got into it and, you know, connecting it to my book. Sorry about that. My alarm went off because I had stuff in the washing machine. But basically, I'm gonna leave this here because I do think that I've spent ages on it, and I hope that it was enjoyable. I hope that you know, have time to buy these things for people or whatever. They're all books that should be widely available, even like in shops physically, so. But thank you for watching. I will see you in a week. I'm gonna try and do weekly videos. Next week's about Formula One. I don't know what I'm gonna do next. Maybe some stuff to do with more Christmassy. Blah, I don't know. But yes, have a very happy Christmas and goodbye.